I grew up in Utah, and my neighborhood is about a half hour away from the Navajo Nation. Throughout my childhood, many of my friends have told me stories about seeing ghosts, demons, and other paranormal entities. I didn't really believe in the paranormal, so I usually brushed these claims off as just old legends or fake stories trying to scare me. My perspective on this matter changed one day when I was about 19 years old. My parents had left me home alone while they went to Vegas on a gambling trip. I was visiting a Navajo friend of mine named Ben. We were talking about mysterious and paranormal things, and the topic of skinwalkers popped up. Since Ben was a Navajo and lived on the reservation, he knew a lot about them. He told me that a skinwalker is a type of witch that can shapeshift from human to animal. They can possess humans and animals by making direct eye contact with them. And when they are in human form, they are often seen wearing the skin of the animal they turned into. Ben also told me that the Navajo don't like talking about them, as they fear it encourages misfortune to occur. I didn't really believe what Ben was telling me, assuming it was just part of his culture. Since I was alone in my house, I convinced Ben to come home with me and spend the night. When we got back to my place, we started playing Xbox in the living room. We were playing on a Minecraft server, and I was about to kill an opponent in the game, when I heard some scratching sounds on the window behind me. I looked over, but there were curtains over the window. I quickly forgot about it, as the game was getting intense. We ended up losing, and were sent back to the server lobby. I took this moment to get up and use the bathroom. To give some quick context, the downstairs level of my home has one restroom, and this restroom has a window on the wall opposite the door. I walked into the bathroom, and as I was shutting the door, I heard Ben's voice calling my name. Max? This immediately freaked me out, as the voice was coming from outside the house. How could Ben be out there? Why would he be out there? I blew it off as my imagination, but then I heard it again, clear as day. Max? It sounded like it was coming right from the other side of the wall. I looked toward the window, but this window also had curtains over it, and I honestly was too afraid to pull them back to see what was on the other side. I just finished up and went back to Ben, who was still in the living room. I asked him if he went outside and called my name, and he immediately went pale. He told me that skinwalkers can lure people into their clutches by mimicking human voices. This changed my entire perspective on the paranormal. I've tried to tell my parents about what happened, but they don't believe me. It's 1 year later, and every night since, I have awakened to knocks on my door and scratching on my windows. I'm afraid to check what's out there. I've thought about calling the cops, but I don't know what to tell them. My parents are thinking about moving soon, and I just hope that whatever is out there doesn't follow me.
I live in New Mexico, but I went to college in Arizona, and I would occasionally go hunting or fishing with friends on the days I didn't have classes. This takes place about a year after I graduated. I traveled to Arizona on vacation, and two of my friends, Thomas and Sean, reached out to me and asked if I wanted to go camping with them in the Sedona Preserves. I agreed, and we met up in Sedona that weekend. Thomas owned a pickup truck, and he and Sean came prepared with tents, food, water, and the like for all of us. He also brought firewood in case we didn't find a lot of trees in the desert, and some guns with blanks in case we had to scare away some wild animals. We drove out into the desert and set up camp a few miles away from town. It felt nice to go camping with my friends again, and it brought me back to the days of the past when we would do things like this almost every weekend. I'll skip the unnecessary details of the day and get to what happened that night. We had built a fire and were talking about what was going on in our lives when we heard a faint rustling coming from the bushes a few feet away. I looked toward the sound and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring intently at me. I gasped and pointed it out to the guys. Thomas assumed it was a mountain lion stalking our campsite. He said the fire should be enough to keep it from attacking us, but just in case, he grabbed one of the rifles and loaded it. He fired the rounds into the air and the eyes disappeared. We went to bed shortly after, and we made sure the fire had plenty of fuel to keep predators from raiding our campsite. Nothing else happened that night. When we came out of our tents the next morning, we saw tracks walking in and around the campsite, and some of our food bags had been opened. At first, it seemed like a wild beast right at our sight. But things got strange when I noticed the tracks. The tracks from a distance looked like coyote tracks, but looking closer, they looked more like hooves with clawed toes. The weirdest thing I had ever seen. I just assumed the camp was raided by some coyotes, and then a mule deer or a peccary walked over the prints. The rest of the day went by fine without any weird occurrences. That night, however, was the breaking point. We had just returned from a hike and were setting up another fire. I was getting the matches when we heard a howl in the distance. We didn't pay much attention to it as we knew coyotes roam these areas, but hearing a howl as the sun was setting is enough to give anyone chills. As I continued lighting the firewood, the howls got louder and more distorted. Suddenly the howls turned into screams. It was almost as if there was a group of humans screaming at the top of their lungs out there. I looked at Thomas and Sean and they looked back at me with concern. The screams continued for about 3 minutes, then completely stopped. I should mention that our campsite was on a small hill, so whoever or whatever was out there was slightly below us. Also, there was a large mesa behind our tents, and ahead was the desert field. We finished lighting the fire and sat down around it. We started talking and suddenly heard what sounded like monkeys screeching. The sounds were coming from the mesa behind us. The screeches grew louder and louder, and we started hearing aggressive stomps coming from the mesa towards us. As the stomps grew closer, the bushes suddenly parted and a huge beast came into view. It looked like a giant grizzly bear, but it was covered in blood and patches of its fur were roughly torn out. Its eyes were glowing yellow. When it entered the campsite, it stood on its hind legs almost human-like and let out this guttural yell. It sounded like someone screaming with their lungs full of water. Thomas screamed in reaction and went for one of the rifles. He loaded it and fired point blank into the bear's stomach. The blank amazingly went straight through the bear and a large chunk of flesh was dislodged from its back. To our absolute horror and amazement, the bear didn't die. It just looked down at the wound, then back at us. The wound must have at the very least deterred it from attacking us as it turned around and bounded back toward the mesa. The three of us just stood there for a few minutes trying to contemplate what happened. We looked at each other and simultaneously agreed that our trip was over. We packed up in the ever-growing darkness, drove back to Sedona, and spent the rest of the night in a hotel. The next morning we were talking to the waiter over breakfast when Sean told him what happened the previous night. The waiter told us that we must have seen a Skinwalker. They can shapeshift from humans to animals, and their calls can often sound like distorted calls of other beasts. Thomas then brought up the fact that he shot the Skinwalker through the stomach at point-blank range and how it reacted, to which the waiter said that Skinwalkers can only be killed with a silver bullet through the chest. That's how I found out the reason why the blank had traveled so far through the bear's stomach. Turns out Thomas had the foresight to bring a small box of lead bullets just in case the blanks weren't enough to scare the predators away and we had to defend ourselves. To this day, none of us have ever had the guts to go back to that desert. I just hope that the next person or group of people who come across that monster are just as lucky as we were.
Every summer since I turned 5, my parents would send me to summer camp. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and the summer camp was a couple hours from town. I met some of my closest friends at that camp, and I have some pretty good memories there. Even today, I look back on them with fond nostalgia. However, there was one summer when I was 10 years old where things took a turn for the creepy. Things started out okay, and the first couple of days went by fine. The third morning, I woke up and went to breakfast like normal. On the way out of the mess hall, I saw a dead squirrel in the center of the lawn. It wasn't just dead, it was cut open and its entrails were spilling out. It scared me to see something like that, but I quickly forgot about it, thinking it was the victim of a predator attack or something. That was the start of the weird happenings. From then on, dead animals started showing up in the campgrounds every morning. They showed up all over the camp, not just in the center. One camper reported seeing a dead rabbit in one of the outhouses, and another camper claimed to have seen a few dead birds piled up in the fire pit. Every time a carcass was found, the stomach was always cut open and the innards were falling out. After this happened for a good month, the counselor started keeping a much closer eye on all of us. We weren't allowed to leave our cabins when we went to bed, and everywhere we went, we had to be escorted by a counselor. I didn't quite understand at the time why they were so upset, but looking back now, they must have thought the camp was being terrorized by a serial killer. Dead animals continued to show up, along with other things. I woke up one morning to find a pile of human teeth in front of my cabin door. That same day, we went kayaking in the lake, and there was a pair of deer antlers in the counselor's kayak. Whoever was doing this was incredibly weird. This continued for another couple weeks before the final event occurred. I was getting ready for bed one night when two of my friends, Ryan and Stan, wanted me to sneak out of the cabin with them. I was uneasy because of all the weird things that happened, but they persuaded me. We grabbed some flashlights, snuck out of our cabin, and started walking around the grounds. It's amazing how you feel when you do something against the rules. You feel that rush of adrenaline and excitement over the fear of getting caught. We walked down the pathway leading to the center of the camp. When we got there, Stan put his hands in front of Ryan and me, effectively blocking our way. We asked him what was wrong, and he pointed in the direction of the fire pit. There was a figure standing in front of it, hunched over something on the ground. I didn't know exactly who or what it was, but I didn't necessarily want to find out. At this point, Ryan had the stupid idea of shining his flashlight on the figure. Upon shining the light on the figure, we could see that it was a human figure, and it was hunched over a freshly killed peccary. When Ryan's light fell upon the figure, it turned and looked at us. What I saw in front of me, I still see in my nightmares. It was a human, but it had the head of a goat. Its hands had jagged claws on them, and its feet were hooves. Both its mouth and clawed fingers were stained with blood from the peccary, and its eyes were glowing bright red. I screamed, and we ran back into our cabin, slamming the door behind us. Everyone woke up and looked at us with confusion. The door opened, and some counselors ran in. They inquired as to what we were doing outside past curfew, and we told them what we saw. The counselors went with us to the fire pit, but all that remained was the peccary carcass. We went to bed, and the next morning, camp was ended early for the summer. None of the campers believed us, but to this day, Ryan, Stan, and I are sure that what we saw was a Skinwalker. I have been to the camp every summer since then, until I turned 15, and nothing strange has happened. I just hope that I never come across a Skinwalker again. What's up, everybody? This is the Lone Wolf here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 Skinwalker stories. I would also like to give a big thank you to my guest for this episode, Dr. Gangster's Horror Stories. He makes awesome stuff, and I highly recommend you check out his channel. There will be a link to his channel in the description below, as well as an icon that will appear at the end of this closing. So if you guys enjoyed listening to his narration, feel free to check him out and show him some support. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications, and join the Lone Wolf Pack. If you guys want to send me a message, there will be links in the description for my email and Twitter accounts, so if you guys have any personal scary stories or creepypastas that you want me to read, feel free to send me a message, and I'll use it in a future video. There will also be links in the description for the music artists that I use, as well as the specific tracks, in case you're interested in the music. And finally, if you guys have any constructive criticism, feel free to leave me a comment. I'm always looking for new ways to make this channel better, and I welcome all ideas. Until next time, you guys, stay spooky. And remember, the hunt begins when the moon is full. See you soon.